that I will be recusing myself, and we have an alternate member here. I think we'll call Mr. Dolman, who's an alternate member, up for the approval of the minutes. And by the time we get through some of those administrative things, we'll be ready to call the first case, hopefully. With that, I call the December meeting.
We want to call the roll.
What?
Call the roll.
Yes, I'm calling the meeting to order. If we can call the roll, please.
Mr. Frary?
Here.
Mr. Lataille?
Here.
Ms. McGinnis? Here. Mr. Daly?
Here.
Mr. Dolman?
Here.
Mr. Hoke?
Here.
Chairman Goodman?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, just one point of information, because it's become an issue at some other meetings. I would just remind the members of the board, because people have been in and out for meetings, that if you were not present during a meeting that you're approving the minutes, that you abstain.
That would be correct.
Okay. Just as a reminder.
Yes, yeah. That's correct. Anyone who wasn't here for a particular meeting should abstain on those minutes. The first minutes that have to be approved would be August 21st of 2019. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve it.
A motion has been made. Is there a second on the motion? I will second the motion. Motion has been made and seconded. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I would ask if we could call the roll.
Mr. Frary?
Abstain.
Mr. Lataille?
Yes.
Ms. McGinnis?
Abstain.
Mr. Daly?
Here.
Was that a
Yes.
affirmative vote? Okay.
Mr. Hoke?
Abstain.
Mr. Dolman?
Yes.
And Chairman Goodman?
Yes, that motion carries with 4 votes. The minutes are approved. The next minutes to be approved would be the September 18th minutes. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion.
Motion has been made. Is there a second on the motion?
Seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I would ask if the clerk could please call the roll.
Mr. Frary?
Yes.
Mr. Lataille?
Abstain.
Ms. McGinnis?
Abstain.
Mr. Daly?
Yes.
Mr. Hoke?
Abstain.
Mr. Dolman?
Yes.
Chairman Goodman?
Yes, those minutes pass with 4 votes. The next order of business would be to approve the November minutes of the ZBA. Is there a motion on that?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I would ask if the clerk could please call the roll.
Mr. Frary?
Yes.
Mr. Lataille?
Yes.
Ms. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Daly?
Abstain.
Mr. Hoke?
Yes.
Mr. Dolman?
Yes.
Chairman Goodman?
Abstain. Those minutes pass with 5 votes. The next order of business would be approval of the calendar of meeting dates for the Zoning Board of Appeals for the year 2020.
Just as a point of order, Mr. Chairman, I inquired with Linda. We received this last week or last meeting. There have been a couple of changes. Is that correct, Linda?
Yes.
Could you please detail those for the rest of the board?
The February meeting got moved because of the school vacation to help members. And there's open voting in April? May? June. And our meeting had to get shifted because this room is not available.
So the June meeting is on the 4th Wednesday instead of the 3rd, and the February meeting, again, is on the 4th Wednesday instead of the 3rd.
Yep.
Thank you.
As is the April meeting. Any discussion on the proposed calendar?
Just wanted to make a point that the town board at the organizational meeting on January 14th will be appointing 2 alternate members to the Zoning Board of Appeals to fill vacancies. And we confirmed that all of these dates will work for those alternates to the extent relevant.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a motion on the proposed dates?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we approve the calendar.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there discussion on the calendar? Hearing none, if we could please call the roll.
Mr. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Latif?
Yes.
Ms. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Daly?
Yes.
Mr. Hope?
Yes.
Mr. Dolman?
Yes.
And Chairman Goodman.
Yes. Those are the preliminary matters we had to do. Mr. Green just did call me back, so while we were doing that, so let me just step out.
Okay. Mr. Green just called.
It's beautiful. Have you been to the water park or seen it? It's gorgeous. I just don't think anyone knows about it. I mean, like, when I was there, I went in and it was like, oh my God, this is like a multi-million-dollar complex. And there was 8 people. It was $1 billion.
Where? What are we talking about?
At the, in Monticello. The casino, and they put in a water park.
Oh,
there,
really?
too. It's gorgeous, beautiful.
Haven't been down there.
It's $128 a night. How much? At the water park, it's $128 a night for a room. And with the room, you get a family of 4, get passes to the water park, and it's like an unbelievable water park. Oh, God, destroys it. Not even close. It's just gorgeous. And it's so it's interesting. The casinos, like, it's kind of on the same complex, but it's like a mile away. So, like, if at night, like, Dad says, hey, just hop in the car, it's like 2 minutes up the road. And you don't really leave the complex, you're going out into town. But it's gorgeous. It's amazing. It's just,
But why aren't the people going there?
so I think they made a mistake with the casino specifically, in that they, it looks like it has, a lot of it was oriented towards the Asian population. Like there's a lot of Asian food, Asian table games, but there's no smoking.
It's what?
No smoking.
Okay.
Which is.
We're going to go on, again, apologize for the delay. We are going to go on with Mr. Dolman as an alternate. Mr. Green is in a traffic situation right now where they're waiting for a tow truck to get a car out of traffic's way. So we don't know how long that's going to be. I did ask him if it does get out soon enough to still come by for the second case. So I would ask if we could please call the first case. Again, I apologize for the delay this evening.
The appeal of Lotus Solar, agent of the owner for a variance from section 220-18A3 of the zoning ordinance of the town of Niskiuna as it applies to the property at 864 Beach Drive, Niskiuna, New York, located in the R1 Low Density Residential Zoning District to obtain a ground-mounted solar array, to maintain ground-mounted solar arrays that exceed the accessory structure height limit. Section 220-18A3 states, unless otherwise specified, accessory structures shall not exceed 15 feet in height based upon field measurements made at a final inspection, and as constructed, the solar arrays have a height of 17 feet 9 inches. Therefore, a 2-foot 9-inch height variance is required. 12 notices were sent out, 0 responses.
Okay. If the applicant could please come forward and state your name and address for the record. I will also make a record that a neighbor sent a letter to the town and requested a personal viewing of the site, which I have done.
Okay.
I did not discuss the particulars of the application and advised the neighbor that if they wanted those before the board, to come to the board this evening. So if you could just set forth your name, address, the basis of the application, and what measures you took to try to mitigate the need for a variance.
Okay. My name is Jeevan Goff. I'm with Lotus Solar, and I'm located in Hudson, New York. And I just wanted to explain that this is a little unusual situation because the height of this structure is variable. It's a motorized tracking solar pole that changes tilt during the day. At night, the height is only about 12 feet for the entire night. It sleeps flat. In the morning, it does tip up to catch the early morning sunlight. But as soon as the sun comes up, most of the day, it's almost flat. So the height is within the 15-foot requirement. But again, in the evening, for a couple hours, as the sun sets, it's trying to tip up to catch that last ray of sun. So it does exceed the height for those time periods. Since I made the original application, I talked to the manufacturer of the tracking mechanism. It was in Vermont, and their engineers were able to modify the tracking mechanism where it never tips up past 14 feet 9 inches, which is within the variance. So it can never tip up higher than that amount after that software was changed in the unit. So I thought that the problem was solved, and I actually tried to recall this this application because I thought that the problem was solved. But when Tom came out to inspect, he said that because one of the trackers is on a slope, and one side of the panel is about 17 feet 9 inches above the ground that's sloped down. On the upper side, of course, it's only about 11 feet. So it's kind of an unusual situation. I didn't even consider that. I thought it was already going to pass the qualifications because of when we reprogrammed and modified the tracker, if you look at the structure itself, it never exceeds 14 feet 9 inches in height. But because it's on a sloping ground, there's a few feet of excess height on the bottom side where the slope is going down. So I was hoping that we could get some kind of resolution and allow that to go on through.
Can you lower the height of the stanchion that it's on?
No, it's a fixed design engineered pole. It's very difficult to lower the pole itself.
But is it possible to lower the stanchion by taking 2 feet out of the stanchion so that when it tilts up, it's still underneath the 15-foot?
I'd have to talk to the engineers. I don't think it's possible because it's a very engineered tapered pole. So I don't think it can be easily cut like that.
Was there a building permit for this before it went up?
Mhm. Yes.
Did you do the erection of did your company do it?
Yes, we erected it.
So let's take this a step back. You got a building permit. I assume there was a plan.
Mhm.
Yes?
Yes.
You got a building permit to put the solar panels up.
Right.
I assume that there was some type of site visit that was made by somebody from your company.
Mhm.
Yes?
Yes.
And at that time, and I don't know if it was you or somebody else, were you aware of the 15-foot zoning ordinance that none of these panels could go above? Were you aware of that?
Yes, and we were told that initially we're told that the unit doesn't exceed that height.
Who told you that?
The manufacturer.
Did the manufacturer make a visit out there?
No, they're several hours away in Vermont. So.
Okay, how would the manufacturer know that they wouldn't exceed the 15-foot height?
They manufacture hundreds of these units, and they know all the different heights of the unit, and they assured us that it wouldn't be exceeding that height. And they said it's also programmable. We can change it to.
I'm a little confused because clearly topography and the nature of the terrain that you're putting this on would have an effect on it, right?
Right. They're only considering from the base of the pole to the top of the tracker.
So what they told you was absolutely incorrect.
Yeah, it was a little bit misleading because they didn't
It was
realize.
more than a little bit misleading. It was
Misleading.
incorrect.
Right.
Okay.
But they were.
And let me express my ignorance because I didn't know that solar panels tipped. So
Yeah,
this
it's-
was a,
It's a
this
unique
was,
feature that we offer to our customers. Yeah.
I appreciate that, but I did not know that.
Mhm.
So you were told that it wouldn't exceed the zoning ordinance of 15 feet. Obviously, your company installed them
Mhm.
and programmed them.
Right.
And did you check them to see if in fact they did exceed the 15 feet?
No, I didn't check them at the time because we were assured that it wouldn't. And they sent some special software over the internet to those tracker units to program them not to exceed that height. And unfortunately, that download into the mechanism didn't work properly.
Who did the download? Company or
The
somebody?
the company in Vermont, they can send it through the airwaves.
So they didn't come out either.
No, they just send it.
But in any event, when you finally put it up,
Mhm.
did you test it to, I assumed part of the testing, part of the confirmation was make that panel move.
Yeah, it was all tested out, but we didn't actually measure the height. It's a little bit difficult to measure it.
Why?
Because we don't have a ladder that easily would be available to test that height of, it's on a slope, so it takes a special ladder and we just didn't have the equipment.
It doesn't take a special ladder.
And
Mr. Latif and I could go out and measure it.
yeah,
So let's forget that, okay?
All right.
Did you actually check it, proof it, check it to make sure that it was in compliance?
no, we didn't until Tom came out and we checked it together. Because we were pretty assured, we were pretty confident that it didn't exceed the height.
Well, Mr. Canizzo was able to come out, and I assume in a short period of time, did he have a ladder?
No, we had a laser tape measure that,
So a simple laser tape measure that you can get at Lowe's would have taken care of that, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't have needed a ladder.
but we were confident that it wasn't going to.
Were you actually aware that there was a 15-foot zoning ordinance in Niskayuna
Yes.
that you couldn't exceed?
Yes,
So you knew that that was potentially an issue given the placement of the panel?
yes,
You were aware of that when it was put up, right?
yes,
But you never checked it once it was put up, right?
right.
Never measured it because you didn't have the right ladder, even though you didn't need one, right?
Yeah, we didn't have the equipment at the time when it was installed, yeah.
Did you have to comply with any other zoning ordinances when you put it up?
I believe just the setbacks from the property borders.
Did you know that there were setbacks,
Yes,
setback requirements?
yes. And we-
Did you measure so that where the placement was, they wouldn't violate the setback?
Yes. we did.
Why is it that you checked the setbacks and didn't check the height, if you were aware of all this?
My team, like I said, that was installing it, they didn't have the equipment to properly check it, and we were confident that the manufacturer had programmed it where it wouldn't exceed the height.
Okay, but we know that that's incorrect, right?
Yes,
It was your responsibility as the representative of the owner. Did you put the owner in a tough position, right? You do understand that potentially, if we do not grant a variance for this,
Mhm.
that either they would have to be altered or taken down or something else, right?
right. That's why when we saw the problem with Tom, we had it altered to not go above 14 feet 9 inches, which is within the requirement. But then Tom noticed that there's a slope, so one edge of the structure is a little bit higher than.
So it's still not
On
in
the ground.
compliance.
If you measure from the ground, yes. But if you measure from the base of the pole, it's in compliance.
How can it be not in compliance? It's in compliance from the base of the pole.
Yeah, the structure itself is 14 feet 9 inches maximum height,
Right, but
but it's mounted on an inclined surface. So this, if you measure from this point, it's a few.
the
feet taller.
Niskayuna building inspector has told you it's out of compliance.
He said that
Correct?
when a building is on a slope like that, you can take the average of the lowest and the highest point, which that average would have been within compliance, yes. But then I got a letter that said, no, we go by the maximum, which seems counterintuitive to me because the structure itself is within, and just a matter of the landscaping of the land could have been built up under the tracker by the owner.
Have you been out there at these varying times that you tell us to make sure that the panel is operating and is at the correct height during certain periods of the day?
Yes, I have. I've monitored it in the morning, in the evening, in the daytime, and at night it's laying flat, so there's no way. It's only about 11 feet tall at night, so.
I interject. If you didn't have the measuring equipment when you installed it, how are you now measuring it? Have you gotten a laser?
Yes,
Okay, so you have, since you installed it, you went and bought the equipment so that you can measure it?
yeah, my installation team didn't have that equipment with them.
How
And
did you
you
install it without
actually
a-
monitored, you actually went out and at those times and saw it. You weren't doing it remotely based on what the computer was saying.
No, I actually monitored it. I was there all day doing some other work in the home. So,
When was that?
it was in November. I don't remember the exact date, but it was.
How does the pitch change from summer to winter when the sun's at a different angle? Is it higher or lower in terms of the top height in the summer, or is it higher in the winter?
In the summer, it stays more flat because the sun is overhead. So it's actually lower in the summer. In the winter, the sun is toward the horizon, so it tries to tip up. But we've modified it where it cannot tip up past 14 feet 9 inches.
But it does.
No, it doesn't. It does not tip up above 14 feet 9 inches, the structure itself.
Sir,
But the land under the structure is sloped, so it depends on where you're measuring
sir,
it. Yes.
just have a question. Are we talking about both arrays or one array now?
Only one of them has the slope. The other one's on a flat surface, and it's never above 14 feet.
And when you were talking previously about that you were aware of the 15-foot height requirement,
Mhm.
that you were not aware of the how that was going to be impacted by the slope, correct?
Correct. I was not told that you would take the average of the slope under the structure, and the average is still within the limit.
But when you installed the arrays, you were aware of the 15-foot height variance.
Correct. And we asked the company to program the tracker not to exceed the 15-foot height.
So if they were both on flat land now, they would not be in. You would not need a variance, right?
Exactly. It's just the slope under that one tracker makes it a few feet higher than the. But that's only a certain times of the day, not the entire day.
Sir, I have a question.
Sure.
What I'm trying to determine is right now, so it sounds like the concern is two things. First off, it sounds like you weren't 100% clear on how we were measuring 15 feet. Is that accurate?
Correct. And I
Okay.
asked Tom, and he said that you would take the average of the.
He said it was going to be the average, and then you were issued
A week later, I got a
a
letter.
week
saying
later saying
that
that
you go
it's
by the
based on the
maximum.
maximum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which seems
So,
counterintuitive.
Can I confirm which is it that we do? Is it the average or the maximum?
For principal structures, we do the average, but we were not able to find a section of the code where the average height setback applies to accessory structures. So the confusion is that that is the way that we measure it for the majority of anything that we issue building permits to. But in this particular case, when we were trying to figure out if the average structure actually applies to accessory structures, we couldn't say. And so we will be conservative to make sure that the properties are in conformance. So conservatively, we cited the maximum. The zoning board has the right to reinterpret, but I can confirm that the average is below 15 feet and the maximum is higher, and we cited the maximum just to be safe.
Okay. So is it also accurate to say that since you have adjusted the software,
Mhm.
would you be in compliance with our maximum distance of being under 15 feet?
No, not
No, you would not.
because of the slope, yeah.
But
Okay.
with the average, you would be.
But the average, we would be well within, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So
And that difference is 2.9 feet still.
Mhm.
Can you further adjust the slope so that it doesn't come up quite as high?
I could request the manufacturer to adjust that one tracker where it doesn't.
So they could do that.
okay.
And what is the percentage of energy loss over the course of an entire 24-hour period if you did that?
I'd have to calculate it, probably 20% would be lost.
For the, even though you say it's only that high for 25% of the day, you would lose a full 20% of the energy?
I would have to calculate it, but I'm just estimating because
What is the home's energy requirements?
the home is all electric and it's a fairly large home, so it's actually using more than the solar can generate.
Well, do you know how many kilowatts?
It's using about 40,000, I think, a year or something like that, whereas most homes use around 12,000.
So it's electric heat as well as?
Yeah, it's electric heated, electric cooking, everything. That's why you needed the extra power of the tracker in order to, because the trackers generate 40% more energy than just a fixed pole would generate. Because in the morning, the sun just glances off at fixed instead of it facing directly into the sun.
So on an annualized basis, they're still running a deficit?
Yes. I mean, my opinion, for what it's worth, is it's a good project. It's a, clean energy. We tried our best to stay within the parameters.
Can you move it to a place where the land isn't sloped?
It would be very expensive. It would be tens of thousands of dollars to move it, unfortunately.
But it could happen.
But it could be easily, the landscaping could be modified under the tracker, obviously.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you if this landscape was to be modified and to be flat like the other panels you have. Where would that put you?
I would have to get an estimate, but I would think it would be a lot less than moving the tracker because it's got a big foundation under the ground that would be hard to
Okay,
move.
how big is the base on this? Just curiosity. I mean, I don't know enough about the base.
The base is it's a 5-foot diameter.
5 foot?
It's like a donut
Okay.
under the ground, and then there's a
Okay.
pole that comes 6 feet up to the ground.
So
So it's buried way
It's
down.
buried in there, and the way you bury it in the slope, so you have to, from certain side,
The excavator,
okay,
dig it out.
you have to go down. Now, how high is the base again? 2.9? The base?
The base is only a few inches
Only a few inches?
from the ground, yeah. It's a 6-foot pipe that goes 6 feet down into the ground. And
Okay,
it pokes up about maybe 3 or 4 inches above the ground.
3-4 inches above the ground.
And then there's a mast that
And-
mounts onto that. It's
and
about
is-
11 feet tall.
Is it the same scenario for the one you have on the flat?
Yeah.
The same thing?
Yeah, that's the standard.
So if you were to flatten where the slope is, that will eliminate this problem that we're talking about.
Yeah, for the maximum, yes.
Now, let me go back a little bit to when you start talking about that you had to show up in here, and it looks like you guys were able to get it to be reduced. At one point, you guys say that 75% of the 24 hours that is in use does not exceed the 15. Now it's 100%.
Right.
But because it's on the slope,
Right.
Tom Canuzzo, when he went, he found out on one side it's 11, you said?
Yeah.
And,
I've got the measurements.
but close to
Approximately.
11, right?
Yeah.
And the other side,
I think it was 12 or 13, I believe. Yeah, 11 and then 17. So the
Okay.
average was 14.
okay, so what I'm getting at, is it because the base tilted with the slope and that's what's causing the one side, it's 11 something and it's 17 on the other side? Because when I went and I looked at the property, it looks like the slope is down like this
Right.
and the panel is like right here.
Level.
Right. So I'm assuming the base is going down with the slope, right?
No, the base is directly going straight down.
So if it's going down directly, why is it on one side it's 17 and why is it 11?
The base goes straight down this way, but
Right.
the land is sloping, so the base is going straight down.
Okay,
So the pole that comes up is straight up.
right?
So that means the tracker, this side will be a little bit higher.
So is the panel, the one side is going with the slope, that's why?
No,
No.
Just for the type.
it's totally
In your
level.
packet, in
Yeah.
his email, he actually shows.
Oh, okay, let me
So
see that.
There's an email from Tom.
Because I'm interested. I saw the one that said technical
I know, it is
specification.
confusing. So if you look in the email, page 2 of the email, I think you'll see it starting out the email from Tom Canizzo on November 22nd, where they're trying to figure out what the height is. On the second page of the email, he has a diagram that shows that the main pole is 14.75, and you can see it's not, and he can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, well, they not,
It's tracking this way, and
Right.
the ground is this way, so it's down here that is 17 and
Yeah, and
Does
this,
that make sense?
yeah,
okay,
That one?
yes,
this
yes.
diagram is pretty accurate.
Yes, and I see that on your technical specification.
Mhm.
Same, I see that on the technical specification.
Mhm.
And that one's different though, because that one's actually looking at the back of
Mhm.
the solar panel. This is looking at
At the front,
side.
yeah, and we have it right here. So right now, to eliminate this 2 feet, what would your company or the company from Connecticut, what would they be willing to do to eliminate that and meet the town code for the solar that you're requesting? What can you guys do to make it work and not exceed the 15 feet?
Like I said, we can either reprogram and modify the unit to
Mhm.
stay flat most of the time,
Okay,
or we could have the homeowner level the ground. under
and
that.
you guys willing to do that?
Yeah, I could talk to the homeowner, make sure that's something he can do.
Thank you so much.
I mean,
Mr. Chair, it seems to me part of the underlying question here is the legal interpretation that the town has made of the average, of the maximum height being how we determine things versus the average height. And that's based on some ambiguity, thank you, in the code itself that really doesn't address what's essentially new technology.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was hoping that, Mr. Chair, you could gain proper clarification from our town attorney or from of what that underlying legal question is so that we can determine to begin with if this is an appropriate discussion for us to take up.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's my understanding from what you said that there's specific language in the code that for the primary structure, we use the average, but that language does not exist for accessory structures?
Doesn't seem to apply to accessory structures. Yeah, I can read the code section, or do you have it up already, Alexis?
Yes, in 2 instances. So in the definition section, so it's basically canons of statutory interpretation. When in the building definition expressly says that you measure maximum height from the average grading, but then when you refer back to the accessory structure, it's silent on that issue. And then again, with regards to building height, it says measure it from the average grading, and then it does not say it for accessory structures when talking about the maximum height. So it's not an ambiguity as much as you presume that.
It's silent, and would we then presume that the legislative body in drafting the law had a reason for doing it differently?
That's consistent with statutes, that of interpretation of statutes, because it was intentionally, it's called expresso. I mean, I don't want to speak Latin, but the inclusion of one thing.
Please do, I didn't go to law
Yes,
school.
well, so the English translation is the inclusion of one thing is the exclusion of another when they're similar. So
Mhm.
I think it's less ambiguity and more, can presume purposeful drafting.
Is there any other structure within the code that we measure by maximum height versus average height? Where, I mean, is this the one exception through silence?
Well, I think there are 2 choices, primary structure or accessory structure. There's only 2
Yeah.
choices.
Okay, so I don't understand why we would assume that we measure this by maximum height when the only mention within the code is to measure things by average height.
Because it specifically, from what I'm being told, mentions for principal structures to measure by average height, and the legislative body did not include that language for
The presum-
accessory structures.
So
So we have to presume that there was a reason they left it out.
That's correct.
I'm having a problem with it as well.
Well, so just to break it down, it's not just two mentions. There's specifically in the code a provision to 2017 that speaks directly to height regulations specific to building. It comes immediately before the provision with accessory structures. So it's not as if it was a mistake. They're one after another. With height regulations, it's very specific. No building or structure shall exceed a height 35 feet above the average finished grade adjoining the building unless otherwise specified. And it's adjacent to the building should be disregarded in the determination of the average finished grade. There's other mentions with respect to cellars. It mentions the average finished grade of the ground adjoining the building for basements as well. So it's not as if it's just building. It seems intentionally left out from accessory structures. That said,
we measure all structures in the town by average height, except for accessory structures, and which we measure by maximum height. And we know that because they didn't say anything.
yeah, so this is an instance where, well, I'm stating the canons of interpretation that if you're
I'm asking a question.
Yeah, no, I think it's a valid question, and I think.
And I recall there was a garage where this issue popped up about a year ago, and if I recall correctly, we said the average height was the correct measure at that time with respect to the garage, which I would believe would be a detached garage would be an accessory structure, correct?
A detached garage is an accessory structure, but I thought that one received a variance because
Or it sloped down in the
it
back.
sloped down,
Right.
which is why they were here for a variance.
At the one on,
Yeah, I actually think that was probably like 2 years ago, but yeah, it was sloped down in the back. And so the back of it was like 17 feet, so they got like a 2-foot variance because the front of it was fine. It was something that we discussed, but I don't think that it was measured on average.
Right. I remember that one.
Yes, but that said, I mean, because of the silence and because I'm just relying on canons of interpretation, if your interpretation based on your experience is that you believe it should be measured from the average grading, that's something that's within your authority to do.
Yeah, the zoning board can definitely say we don't agree with the building.
And it wouldn't be considered like an amendment to the code. It would just be, that's the interpretation of how you measure height.
And we're also in this different territory from when this was done, except for advertising signs. Most structures have walls
Yeah.
to a roof, where here we have a stanchion that is holding up a much larger
Panel, yeah.
apparatus.
Mr. Chair, how would we go about that? Would there be a vote on that interpretation before we reach a conclusion
Essentially,
as
yeah,
to
whether or not.
One thing
whether
that
to grant the variance or not grant the variance?
One thing that might be of relevance is I know this is not akin to really a sign, but how you measure the maximum height of signs is also based on the average grade at its location. So to the extent that this is, a pole with something on top of it, and it's similar to how we do so with signs.
I mean, this is also unique in that, a garage doesn't rotate and move throughout the day. A shed doesn't move throughout the day.
Correct.
So I think that's important to note.
This is
We
also
tried our
a piece
best
of
to meet-
machinery.
Now, you had mentioned that, you could affect the height based on programming it.
I can actually, only the factory engineer.
So-
can.
So there could be a glitch. I mean, I deal with, I think we all deal with technology all of the time. There's upgrades and what kind of guarantee should we go that route? That you're going to have it reprogrammed, that it would be within our guidelines at all times?
We can probably get a guarantee from the manufacturer because I'm not able to change it myself and neither is the customer. It's not user programmable. It's only programmable by the engineers at the factory.
But sir, all those solutions that Ms. McGinnis and Mr. Lateif we're talking about, you wouldn't need a variance at all if you accomplish those things, right?
Right.
And you're here today requesting the variance.
Yeah, because we've done, I think, the best of our feasible ability
Okay,
to
so
try to correct the height. So
have you spoken to the neighbors by any chance about any of their concerns?
no, but it's surrounded by evergreen, so it's almost invisible. It's totally invisible from the street, and it's
I
No,
could see
I
it from
could
the
see
street.
it from the
You can?
street.
I could see
Yes.
it from the street, and I also from a neighbor's house was quite visible because there's no vegetation
There's
between
an
that
opening in the
neighbor
trees.
and the panels. So if there were trees planted there, it wouldn't be immediate, but it would provide some shielding.
Yeah, I
You
wasn't
could-
able to see it from the street, but
Yeah, no, you
Yep.
could see about quarter of it
Hmm.
from the street. But if, I assume, I mean, I didn't go in the back of somebody's property. I assume if I was to go in the back of somebody's yard,
Hmm.
I'll be able to see the whole thing, which,
I did go in the back. of
Oh,
the
you
yard,
did?
And
Okay.
you can
You can see
definitely
it.
see it,
Yeah.
yes.
yeah, from the street, you can only see like a quarter, you know.
So have you had any conversations with the owner about potentially masking that? I mean, obviously, we have submissions, and I assume that Heathwaite's are here this evening, and they're going to have an opportunity to speak. But have you spoken to the owner about any of their concerns in terms of masking the appearance of these solar arrays in the back? Have you discussed that with them at all?
not yet, but he would probably be open to that idea. I mean, it's already got some huge evergreens around masking most of it, but there is an opening in those.
Well, in your opinion, what would be the easier solution, getting the variance and masking the presence of the arrays, or being forced to reduce the size of the arrays or having them sit flat?
That would be more difficult to try to reduce them more. They would lose their efficiency. Customer would lose financially if we did that.
It would kind of undercut the whole purpose of the array, right?
He's trying to be green and make more clean energy, and we would be reducing the clean energy.
So what you're saying is if the variance was granted with a condition that that there be
Trees.
trees that mask the
I think that's a reasonable compromise.
Any other questions from the board? What percentage of the grade change would you need to make to keep this under 15 feet?
It would have to be almost level, like a helicopter landing pad, basically, under that tracker. So we would have to build up some, 2 or 3 feet of dirt.
So it would be very helpful in the summer, but not the rest of the year.
Mhm.
Do you have anything else you wish to add?
I just hope that, this ambiguity doesn't penalize the customer or us unnecessarily. Hopefully we can come to a good compromise.
Do you have any suggestions as to how to mitigate the effects of this on the neighbors, other than trees?
I would say evergreens is the best solution.
And how would evergreens affect the efficiency of the unit?
They're on the north side. There's never sunlight coming from that side. So it wouldn't affect it at all.
I would ask if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard for or against the application. If you could please come forward to the podium and state your name and address.
Hi. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to provide some comments. I'm Karen Heathwaite. My husband Eric is here with me. We live at 836 Red Oak Drive. Our backyard essentially is kitty corner from the property that we've been discussing. Quick background, we selected the neighborhood 20 years ago. We've been there over 20 years because of the mature trees. We selected the home primarily because of the backyard. It backs to Forever Wild, as well as just the view from the back of the house and the deck. We sat on the deck, and that was what made the decision in looking at the backyard. The backyard and the view were distinctive in the market at the time, and we paid for that distinctiveness in the purchase price. The rear of our home, our kitchen window, our sliding glass door, our deck, our backyard, now directly face the backside of the solar panels. So the point that was made earlier by the gentleman that there was no view impact to any neighbors was totally incorrect. The view, I would say it is akin to living behind a drive-in theater with 2 screens. And a couple people that are on the board have had a chance to see that over the past few days, and I think you might be with me on that. It's important to note we fully support solar energy. We're probably some of the greenest people you would also meet. What we don't support is a project delivered by a company that knowingly designed and installed panels that would exceed the maximum height. When you signed that, but when you submitted that building permit, you were told at that time The maximum, not average height, was 15 feet. And you knowingly, your team was in the backyard designing it and installing it, you never measured it. We're extremely concerned about the resulting negative impact to our property value based on the placement and the sizing of these panels. It was also brought up in the earlier conversation that you have informed the ZBA that the panels are within compliance 75% of the day. We've been looking at these panels for more than a year, and the fact that you were contacted, I think it was 12 times with no response, and the fact that we're actually talking about this a year down the road is quite honestly embarrassing to you. It should be embarrassing to you as a firm. We assert that you have submitted false information, that you are in compliance 75% of the day. I am not an engineer, but I do work in the tech field, and the basic laws of physics and math would dictate that there's no way that they are in compliance. The packets I provided to all of the board members have pictures. We can talk about those in a minute. They're not in compliance. So the photos that I've included, and just a quick related point. I'm very curious what angle the panels were at when they were measured to be 17 feet 9 inches tall. And just to clarify, a few moments ago, there were conversations about the fact that there was a 2-foot issue. It's actually 2 feet 9 inches, as noted in the agenda. So I find it impossible to believe any information the gentleman has provided tonight. And I'm, again, curious as to what angle the panels were at when they were measured to be a maximum of 17 9 inches tall. And I think that's a very important element of that measurement. So as far as the photos, note that all but one of the photos is just of the top panel. The bottom panel typically mirrors the position of the top. The angle of the panels in the pictures were just taken a couple days ago. I'm extremely confused as to the contention that in the summer, the panels are nearly flat. We live there, we look at them all day, and they were nearly 90 degrees over the summer. So that's very confusing. All photos, just to be very clear, all photos in your packet were taken from our property. We did not go on to the 864 Beach property at any time. We would never have done that. Next page, excuse me. So over the course of December 15th, late in the day, which was a Sunday, to Monday, the 16th at 4 o'clock, I've been looking at these things for more than a year, but I've never really written it down. I just know that they're always up. I checked them 18 times, so roughly hourly. I did stop at about 9:30 just to preserve everyone's privacy. But of the 18 times I checked, 16 of the 18 times they were upright, including at 9:37. And I will tell you, unfortunately, due to sleep issues in my household, I will often be up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and they are up. So the contention that was just made that at night they are flat is totally false. In particular, if you look at the solar panel photos, the first one was Sunday at 4:34. The panel was flat. I was like, okay, the panel's flat. I checked at 4:51, the panel was back upright. So there's an extremely erratic behavior of the panels. If they ever go flat, it's for a matter of moments, half an hour, and then they're back up. The other point being the contention that the panels are flat during the night. They are always up during the night. So last night I was up, they were up. So I don't understand why we're getting false information for you to make your decision on. There is no rhyme or reason. The next page just is the details of the panel status over the course of the 18 checks. And just the conclusion is we would respectfully request that you do not approve the request submitted by Lotus Solar. The facts they have submitted, and now that I've heard more tonight, I'm even more concerned. They need to be confirmed by the appropriate independent party. They're highly suspect. And if I hear one more time, we did the best job that we could. I'm assuming you got paid for this work. And again, I would be embarrassed if I were you. We will obtain estimates from several vendors regarding the negative impact of this situation on our property value, and we'll provide that information to the town. If Lotus Solar cannot bring the panels consistently into compliance, and despite the fact that they're saying that they can, and that they are in compliance right now. Clearly, with all the other misinformation that has been provided by the gentleman tonight, I have no confidence in that. If they can't bring the panels into compliance, they should be held responsible. They either directly compensate us for our loss in property value, or they install a mutually agreed upon evergreen tree barrier, height, location, width, depth at the property line to mitigate the view impact. And I'm sure there are other alternatives I've not even thought about. So I thought this would be even more straightforward than it ended up being after hearing the information about the appeal. There are a number of pictures within the packet. I cannot understand how the applicant can in any way state that these panels are in compliance when tracked over roughly a 24 period. You can clearly see that they're not flat at night and they are not within 15 feet. So, any questions?
Ms. Heathwaite, I guess what I'm looking at, I understand and I appreciate, and I did look at the pictures, and I agree with you that it does appear that the panels are up during the night. That looks pretty clear. It does look like there's some disagreement. Well, you'll have an opportunity after Ms. Heathwaite. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, I would assume that your major concern is an aesthetic concern for your property and the fact that these panels you can see them from your property. If we were to deny the variance tonight, you're still going to have one panel that's going to be there. It's not going anywhere.
Understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the applicant will still have an opportunity to just reduce it by 2.9 feet. And you'll have two panels there. So is that what you would prefer to have happen, or would you prefer to, and I understand that there's distrust, and I appreciate that. And I'm not trying to say that that's not a significant concern on your part. I'm just trying to, as I asked Lotus Energy, I'm just trying to ascertain what you would prefer to have as an outcome. Would that be a better outcome to reach some kind of compromise, as you referenced, with respect to the evergreen barrier versus a yes or no zero-sum game? Somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. But, at the end of the day, the applicant may lose in the sense that they won't be able to use the solar panels for their intended purpose, and you won't be satisfied with this in the sense that the panels are still going to be there, still interfering with your view and your enjoyment of your property and affecting your property values.
Right.
So that's what I'm kind of trying to figure out here.
My strong preference would be an appropriate barrier. I do not want Lotus Energy proposing the barrier without it being an agreed upon game plan and designed in the right way so that does truly mitigate the impact. Because again, I have no confidence in their ability to deliver a quality product or a quality solution. So I would need the support of this team and perhaps others to make sure that if a barrier is the answer, that it is truly an effective barrier.
Well, I mean, part of this board's issue is we only have a limited amount of jurisdiction, and there's only certain things we can and can't do. Typically, it's a yes or no vote. But I do believe we have an ability to add conditions onto a variance approval.
Well, I think we got to be really, really, really careful here. Traditionally, this board has recommended alternatives of screening and barriers on fencing issues, where a fence is a barrier providing security, providing aesthetic. And not to minimize your concerns at all, I think they're major concerns. But aesthetics have nothing to do with the variance that we're granting or denying. It's a height variance. It's not an aesthetics issue. So for us to all of a sudden interject into that conditions on the applicant to put up what I think is absolutely a reasonable accommodation is not, as far as I'm concerned, is not within this board's power. We far exceed our jurisdiction and our authority by doing that.
What I understood your proposal was that it was more along the lines if you all were to decide, let the panels stay as they are, don't do regrading, don't try to cut them down, would a compromise be to instead erect a mutually acceptable barrier? That's what I thought, but I may have misunderstood.
you didn't misunderstand, and I think that would be an excellent accommodation by the neighbor and/or this company. But understand, please, and I'm not raising it to be difficult.
Yeah.
When we propose conditions on a variance or conditions, it relates directly to the variance. What's before us is a height variance. And the issue is that, at least from what I'm hearing, is the screening that's recommended is to restore some type of natural view for you from your deck and your windows. It's not to deal with the height issue.
It's both.
Well, but the problem is the barrier in and of itself does not change the height of the
Understand?
panels.
Yep.
The variance is the panels are out of code.
Mhm.
They either need to be brought within code
Mhm.
or they need to be taken down.
Okay.
So the issue then becomes is that has nothing to do with a barrier.
Mhm.
I think a barrier's
It's
a
true.
great idea, and I think it's a great accommodation. And, given your concerns and everything else that has occurred, I think it's probably the least that can be done.
Mm.
But what you need to understand, and what I posed, Mr. Chairman, is that can't be a condition of this variance because it has nothing to do with the height variance.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I would like-
We're specifically supposed to consider the environmental,
Yeah, that's what I
the
was gonna-
the physical and environmental effects that a variance would have, and by attempting to mitigate the impact that would have, I believe that's certainly within the.
How does the
jurisdiction of
barrier
board.
mitigate the height?
It doesn't directly mitigate the height. It mitigates the effect
Right.
of the 2.9 feet. That's the purpose
One
of
the
the.
balancing questions that we're required to look at when we do this is whether or not this is providing an undesirable change in the neighborhood. I believe what the neighbor here is arguing is that this is an undesirable change in the neighborhood that affects her materially. And I think that, Mr. Chair, I don't know if I'm correct in this, but my understanding is that if we have an ability to mitigate that impact in the request of the height variance, and that will
Then
mitigate
there isn't as much of an environmental change.
or
in
an
the neighborhood.
undesirable change in the neighborhood. And additionally, well, I certainly understand where you're coming from.
I'm not sure you do. You're being asked to decide a height variance. The height variance, even if you put a stand of trees there, that doesn't correct the height variance issue. And the mitigation that you're talking about is of the height, not the view, not the environmental impact is the height of the structure. Does the height of the structure have an adverse environmental effect?
We consider aesthetic and offer aesthetic remedies frequently on this.
Directly related to the variance. Your remedy doesn't affect the height variance. You haven't done anything for the height variance. With your,
I'm interested in hearing what Ms. Robertson has to say.
Yeah, and Alexis can jump in here, but I disagree. I think that consistently the zoning board has imposed conditions that mitigate the aesthetic impact that a variance is being granted on, or site plan, approvals when you're looking at height variances for a large site. For, large commercial buildings, we have specifically looked at landscaping. I believe in Mario's, we specifically required a buffer to mitigate some of the setback. I understand where you're coming from, Keith, but I completely disagree.
but that, Laura, that was a buffer because of a setback.
I know, but we've also looked at how you mitigate aesthetically the height of a building when you're looking at granting a height variance for a commercial building. Like, what do you do? What do you do to plant? I think it's well within the purview of the zoning board to mitigate environmental impacts and character of the neighborhood.
And because that's
Yeah.
one of the factors that we look at,
Yeah.
it's something that we can look at. I don't know that we have the ability to come up with a plan that is in this meeting that is going to satisfy both parties.
Well,
Can I hear from Ms. Kim?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is actually state statute. So it's, there's a section that specifically addresses zoning board of appeals ability to impose conditions in granting an area or use variance. Your ability to do so is that it needs to be directly related to the proposed use of the property. So that would be use. For area, the conditions should be consistent with spirit and intent of our zoning ordinance and shall be imposed for the purpose of minimizing any adverse impact such variance may have on the neighborhood or community. So the discussion would be, as people have pointed out, whether or not planting trees is reasonably related to the variance that would be granted, and that would minimize the adverse impacts in granting the variance.
And I think based on that interpretation, it couldn't fit in.
Now, just a quick question for Ms.
It clearly does. I mean,
Just a quick question.
definitionally, it does.
Are you saying you are okay with the heights? Because it seems like we're going off tangent here. Are you okay? You the person who stood up and have a little complaint. Are you okay? What we heard that they have reduced it to minimize the heights. And I know you disagree with by the way, good job on the technical stuff there. But are you okay? And I know that we're finding an alternative for you to be able not to be impacted in the backyard. It seems like to me from when I drove by, you the only house kind of impacted by this.
Directly, yes.
And if
agree.
we were to talk to any other neighbors, I don't think they can even see it. They have trees in there. And I drove on both streets. I couldn't see it except,
Great.
like I said, from your driveway I was. Are you okay with the heights that they propose in tonight, with exception to make it feasible for you that they will put some trees in there and make your backyard seem to be okay to look at?
I would say yes, again, just with that same caveat that I don't want Lotus Solar to be the sole designer of what that tree buffer should be. I think an expert needs to be engaged, and it needs to be, because they've never even looked at what this is from my house. I mean, somebody needs to actually consider the impact this has.
Okay, but with the height,
Mhm.
just going back to the height, because I want to agree with Mr. Ferry about the heights, and I agree with both sides. So with the heights, you are okay with it if we can figure a way to work the other details for you to
So I-
make the
yeah.
environment.
Yeah, because honestly, I still disagree with, I still wonder at what angle was this measured? Because to me, there's just no feasible
Well,
way.
we're gonna put
that they're
something,
meeting.
we're gonna put something in there to
Mhm.
say that whatever it is, we're gonna propose it.
Mhm.
And then when we propose it, that's what's gonna happen. And I think Laura is on board, our attorney is on board, the chairman is on board. So
Yep.
we seem to be on the right track as long as everybody's agreeing to that we're not causing anything in the environment and it's not affecting anything.
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Robertson, what was the tree council? How would that work?
Well, the tree council regularly reviews landscaping plans. And so like it would not be normal, I think, for a landscaping plan to come back to the zoning board. But if you wanted to put a condition that would,
It'd have to be approved by the tree council?
yeah, you could put the planning board refers things to the tree council fairly regularly, something like that.
Just Laura,
Council's very pro-tree.
yes, one point just to make is that we couldn't impose a requirement that they have to make essentially a fence out of trees. It would be, the condition has to be related to essentially blocking what we're granting the variance to. So it wouldn't be the entirety of the panel or the solar array. It would be just the portion that's in excess of our 15 feet height restriction. So, I mean, I'm not drawing a picture. The applicant would be responsible essentially for just the one tree that would be blocking the 17.75 height on the downward slope. So I don't know if it's appropriate for tree council to get in, if there's just going to be one matter of one tree.
Well, we don't necessarily know there's gonna be one tree.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be for the purposes of mitigating the aesthetic issue that's caused by the additional height on the, I understand your
On
point.
just the one panel, not on both of the
Yeah,
solar
because
arrays.
The second panel is in compliance, my understanding.
Not sure,
My
based on the other facts that have been presented. Not really sure.
So that's, my concern here is only that I do not want to see the applicant and our neighbor and their neighbor back in here or in the town banging on doors, arguing about whether or not the trees were good enough. So I don't, we as a board are not set up to be an arbiter of landscaping plans between neighbors. So so other than a referral to the tree council, what options do we have as a board?
Has the building permit has been-
Mr. Chairman, hang on. I listened to this for better than an hour. We're here for one reason only. Height. It's in violation of the height. He needs a variance to 2 foot 9 inches. That's where we're at. Mr. Ferry said, we're here for height. How we got on any other subject is beyond my comprehension. Now, I've listened to this pretty closely. Gentleman admitted he was wrong with the height, but it still went up. He admitted that, well, the slope. I didn't want to ask him what the degree of the slope was versus the height, because you can figure that out by cotangent. Nope. He admitted he was wrong. We're here for 17 feet, 9 inches to give him a variance for 2 foot, 9 inches.
At what angle was that measured?
Now, what are we going to do?
Yeah, I would like to know, based on some of the other unfactual information you have been provided clearly today and previously, how do we even confirm that 2 feet 9 inches is the actual variance amount?
But that's
I'm not
town
confident.
inspector said.
What I'm saying here is our job tonight is the height. You can put anything else you want into it. We still have to come back to the height. Am I right, Counselor?
Correct.
Yes.
The remaining issues, I believe, could just be in the building permit application could be addressed outside of the zoning board of appeals if the variance is granted.
And Counselor, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we're overstepping our boundaries if we go any further than that right now.
It's confusing to me, just to be totally honest with you, as a 20-year resident of this town, some of the different opinions I'm hearing from all of you in terms of the aesthetic part of this and the fact that it is nearly 3 feet taller than it should be. And again, I still question the fact that that thing is not flat during the summer, but nearly 90 degrees. So height is a part of the aesthetic thing that we are having to deal with and impact on our property
I
value.
sympathize with you 100%. But tonight, we're here for 17 feet,
Then I think you decline their application.
okay?
Then I think you have to decline it. That was, and then if you want to forget the tree barrier, but I don't think that, I
I
don't
mean,
know.
we could talk about this all night, because I used to work on solar systems, okay? I was an electrician for 38 years, right? I'm pretty familiar with solar height, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. KW, whatever, okay? I could talk all night on that. That's not the problem. The problem is 17 feet. That's what we have to go by.
17, 9 feet.
Thank you.
And
Right?
I agree,
That-
Mr. Daly. I feel as if our conversation is starting to go more towards one that we would have.
Right.
It was a use variance. Here, it's area. While there is jurisdiction to impose conditions, since there is not a clear consensus of whether or not, and we don't want to be in the business of policing tree heights, I think that more appropriately falls within jurisdiction of the building department, and that they could mitigate these issues rather than the zoning board of appeals.
And
So,
we're going back to what Mr. Ferry was saying.
correct.
But for the record, a building inspector would not be able to require a tree buffer. There's no building code that would say that. So if you feel like the aesthetics of this are mitigated by a tree buffer, that would have to come from you. The building inspector cannot require a tree buffer at all. The only reason that you guys could require a tree buffer is because they're asking for a benefit. They're asking for a benefit to go over 15 feet high. If you guys grant them the benefit to go over 15 feet high with no conditions, the building inspector just says, okay, building permit closed. If you guys want some mitigation on aesthetics, you cannot refer that back to the building permit unless you refer it with a condition that says a planting plan. If you don't feel that there's a need to mitigate the height with a planting plan, that's fine. But you couldn't refer it back to the building inspector and expect that he could require a planting plan. That is not in the code.
The applicant is willing to do a tree barrier? If you could come to the microphone.
I'll have to talk with the actual homeowner, but I believe he would be willing to.
Okay.
I also wanted to clarify a few things. I think some of the photos you've taken may have been before I changed the settings, which was,
taken December 15th and 16th, Sunday and Monday of this week.
okay, the tracker is at a 30-degree angle, just to answer your question. That's the maximum angle it's allowed to tip up at this point.
Yeah, but I'm just very unclear because we live there.
Oh, look, we can't have a private conversation.
I'm sorry.
He's asking me.
Okay, but you can't have a private conversation.
Yeah, I just wanted to
This is-
clarify her points.
Between this whole crowd here, this has gone on too long.
So is there any other clarifications you need from my
Call
side?
for a vote.
Is there anyone else who wants to be heard for or against the application? Any discussion? Does anyone wish to make a motion?
I'm currently unclear on what the applicant is willing to do in terms of mitigating the aesthetic impact of the height. I would move to table the application until the applicant can come back and confirm that the homeowner is in a position to put a barrier up to mitigate the height issue. That's what I would make the motion.
Let me also ask, have you seen the photographs that they took?
No, I haven't.
Can you, Linda, can you provide, I know there's an extra set of them. Can you take that? Here's the question that I have. I understand that there was a reprogramming and everything, but in my very naive and non-technical mind, I look at their photographs and I say, your solar panel is not operating as you are telling us it's operating. So as part of this, just let me finish. As part of this, I think someone from your company or actually from the manufacturer, whoever does the programming, needs to come and do a very thorough analysis of what's going on with this apparatus.
Okay.
Because, and I may be wrong, because as I said to you before, I didn't even know that they tipped anymore.
Yeah.
So the issue is part of it is, it may not be operating as it's programmed. Maybe they thought they programmed it in Niskayuna, New York, and they did it in
No, I know
Niskayuna,
exactly what's
Nevada.
happening with this.
But the issue
I've seen the
is that
photos.
that tells me in my very untrained eye that it's not working
Okay.
the way it's supposed to work. So part of this whole thing needs to be, if it was restricted by programming, did that work? Is it working based on these photographs and whatnot? That has to be, I think, the first thing that needs to be.
Based on the photographs, it is staying at the correct 30-degree angle, but it is actually going into it's called a snow mode, which it must have inadvertently got turned on. So what it does at night, it dumps the snow. It tips up to the maximum tilt, 30 degrees, to try to dump the snow off. And I can deactivate that mode, and it will definitely lay flat all night once that's deactivated.
But that's part of my concern. And I think also the issue, as Mr. Hoke said, is it's hard for us to put conditions on that can't be met.
Mhm.
And I think I would caution this board to, there's no way to police what you're requiring. Because it could be, I put up one tree and that's my barrier, that may not be your barrier. And I don't think we're in a position to dictate how much, where, in what way, by whom, all that stuff. So there's some preliminaries that need to be resolved before it sounds like this board can reach a decision.
I'm willing to.
I would agree with that.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, I
procedurally,
second
yeah.
the motion.
Okay, I was going to say procedurally,
there's an
there was a
open
motion made and there's now a second and it's a motion to table. I believe that
That's
under Robert's rules, the motion to table is going to take preference now. Is there any discussion on the motion to table? Hearing none, could we call the roll on the motion to table?
Mr. Ferrari,
Yes.
Mr. Lataif,
Yes.
Ms. McGinnis,
Yes.
Mr. Daly,
Yes.
Mr. Hoke,
Yes.
Mr. Dolman,
Yes.
Chairman Goodman.
Yes, the application is tabled. And do we want it, I'm going to ask the applicant and the neighbor, do you want this tabled for 1 month or 2 months? 1 month?
We have to resolve it as soon as possible.
Okay.
And I would also ask if, as you consult the neighbor,
Mhm.
talk to them,
Yeah,
please.
I was thinking when you said neighbor, I was thinking it was the house next door, which was behind the evergreens.
No,
But
feel
you're,
free to come over and look at it from our
you're,
yard.
you're kind of across.
Okay.
Okay.
So this will be on the calendar for January.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And with that, we will call the next case, but I will be recusing myself from that matter.
Just hang on, Linda, for 1 second while we get reshifted here. Is Mr. Green, you're coming up, correct? Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Wish everyone happy holidays.
To you as well, Fred.
You too.
You're not leaving.
I am.
Scorcher.
Well, God damn it, I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow in the courthouse.
I'm still
You get to stay there.
Take care. Whoops, I want to grab my eyeglasses.
Center position.
I'll see you tomorrow.
I'll see you tomorrow. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
And if the record could reflect at the request of Mr. Goodman, Chairman Goodman, I've assumed the acting chairman's position. So if that's reflected in the record, please. And when you're ready, Linda, you can call the next case.
Appeal of Ronald Walsh for a variance from section 220-25B1A of the zoning ordinance of the town of Niskuna as it applies to the property at 2100 Alexis Ave, Niskuna, New York, located in the R1 low-density residential zoning district, to construct a 6-foot fence in the front and side yard. The property is a corner lot and as defined has front yards along Alexis Ave and Balltown Road. Section 220-25B1A permits the maximum height for fences located in the front and side yards to be 4 feet. As proposed, a 6-foot-high fence will be located in the front and side yards. Therefore, a 2-foot fence height variance is required. 10 notices were sent out, 0 responses, and I received a response from the county. They deferred to local consideration.
Could you please come forward, state your name, address, and tell us a little bit about your request for a variance?
Hello, Ron Walsh, my wife Lisa Walsh. We live at 2100 Alexis Ave. We just purchased a house recently and we're looking to put a fence as a barrier to improve our quality of life on the corner of Balltown and Alexis. We came and we put in for a 6-foot, we feel a 4-foot fence for us is not going to work simply because of there's a traffic light, so there's traffic backed up in the morning and at night past our property. And Balltown Road sits probably 2 to 3 feet above our property. So a 4-foot fence does not give us any privacy and does not help with noise level as to where a 6-foot fence would help us. Also, in speaking to our neighbors directly on Balltown Road behind us. We had thought about maybe doing arborvitae's or something as an alternative, but that would be indirect. That would obstruct their view of oncoming cars when they're pulling out of their driveways. So we didn't want to put up the arborvitae's simply because of we did not want to obstruct their view. So we're here to request a 2-foot variance for a fence along the side to be 6 feet. We have a young son. We have some pets, and the fence proposed would be a 6-foot white vinyl fence, professionally installed. When at the time that I submitted this, I wasn't sure if I was going to actually do it, but the bids came back lower than I thought. So we have a professional company in mind to do the work.
And I'm looking at your submission, your plan there.
Yes.
You understand, and we always explain this, I'm in the same boat as you are. I have literally 2 front yards.
Yes.
One in the front of my house, which is the one that makes sense, and then one on the side of my house that fronts River Road that is also considered a front yard. So you understand that the section that we're talking about is essentially the rectangle that extends from the rear corner of your house to your rear lot line.
Yes.
That rectangle is what must be in, because that's essentially a front yard.
Yes.
Okay.
I learned that when I went to the building inspector in the beginning.
There's no reason for you to know it otherwise, because it defies logic, but that's the way the zoning ordinance is. Let's just talk about this rectangle.
Yes.
Why is it that you can't simply extend from the rear corner of your house, your 6-foot fence, back to your rear lot line?
Well, we certainly could, but that cuts out a lot of yard. And we plan on, at some point, coming back to the building inspector, because our son has been a swimmer for 7 or 8 years, and we want to put a pool in. That would directly cut across where a pool would be. So it just wouldn't work for us. Like I said, he's been swimming for 7 years. He currently swims at the high school. So that's our plan down the road. Hopefully this spring, we would come back to the building inspectors for a pool. That's our goal, along with siding and roofing and where else.
Okay.
Is that fence, the one I'm looking at, is it in,
Yes.
is it in the back of the house? That's the back of the house?
That's the back corner.
The back corner.
Yeah.
So you're gonna be not putting the fence in the front corner, in the back of the.
No, just off the back corner to put in for the yard, because that's where our pets, that's where the pool would be.
And how far is this from Bolton Road, the fence you're proposing?
Okay, so this drawing does you no justice here. I got from the town. From the crown of Balltown Road was about 45 feet to the fence.
45 feet?
About. My ruler, my tape measure is only 30 feet long, so I had to have my wife hold this end and shimmy up to her, and we just did the tape measure again. But
So-
it's about 45.
After you put the fence, you still have 45 feet?
To the crown of the Balltown Road, I think.
You're saying to the
Right.
center of
The
Yes,
center,
yes,
yeah.
yes, the
To
center.
the center, that's
Yes,
okay, I
I'm
understood you.
sorry.
Okay.
No, I understood you. So to the center, and how about to the sidewalk? Do you know,
We don't have a sidewalk.
you don't have a sidewalk?
No,
Okay.
What about to the curb? Any idea?
there's no curb.
Or to the beginning of the
beginning.
road?
Oh, all right, so about 30 feet,
Okay,
30 feet to the edge.
okay, so you still have enough room what my concern is, if a car you don't want it to hit your fence and so on, because
That's
That
why we
happened.
left the big pine trees still there. All
Okay.
3 of them.
and I noticed, I think you have a rock there or something,
Yes,
right?
we're not moving that. That's gotta be about 7,000.
Okay, let's go back, let's go on the other side a little bit. The other side, your neighbor,
Yes,
they have a fence already,
yes,
and that's 6 foot fence?
yes.
Okay. And how is that gonna be connected with your neighbor, or it's gonna be space between them? How's that gonna be?
We were gonna go just straight across from the side of the house to
Mhm.
their corner post,
To the corner?
to their corner.
Okay, so
Which-
then you're using the fence that they already have?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I wanted to know. Now, let's go on the other side. It looks like the fence here goes to the middle of your house?
Yeah, that's the side we were just talking about, yes.
Okay.
Yes, it'd be the middle of my house. yes.
So how far is this from the back of your house to that fence there?
That I'd have to say 20 feet, 20 to 25 feet from the back corner to there. Meet up with their fence, their corner.
Okay, so is your back of your house and their back of the house, are they evenly parallel?
No. Our house is a little bit longer than theirs.
Okay. Okay, did you look at possibly putting the fence to the back of the house on the other side too? Or would that be a problem if you put it to the back?
Are you talking about the left side where it's 20 feet?
Yes.
Yeah, I only thought that I would go to where their fence came to the corner.
Okay. The
That,
only reason I'm saying this because usually we only approve fences to the back of the house. That's what.
oh, okay.
And
I got
that's
you.
why I was wondering how you feel about, is this a problem for you? If it's not a problem, to just put the fence to the back of the house?
No, that wouldn't be a problem at all.
Okay,
It just seemed, because their corner post, we just come off, go straight across. That wouldn't be a problem.
because most of the variances that we approve, most of the people put, the fences to the back of the house. So
Okay.
this way it stays consistent.
Considered a side.
Okay.
That's considered your side yard, and technically, the 6-foot fence has to run from the rear of the house back.
Good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, you're in that situation where you have two
Yeah.
driveways.
We've become educated
sides.
very quickly in the
Yes,
last few months.
yes, it's okay. He deals with it all.
The trees that you mentioned on the side, you said you still have the large, now they're going to stay?
Yes, there's 3 large pine trees. They don't go near, they go to probably about halfway of the 60-foot fence along the Balltown Road area. There was 4 rotted silver maples that we had to have taken out. So we did that. But there's 3 pine trees. They're probably 30 feet tall. Branches start at about 10, 11 feet.
But those are going to stay?
Yes,
Are those the trees by the big rock?
Yeah, those
Yes.
are.
yes.
Thanks.
Well, those are 2 oak trees.
Yeah.
And then they come off of that and go straight back.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, one more thing. So you're willing to go to the back of the house with that 6-foot fence?
Yes,
Other side?
yes.
Okay.
You can still put the gate in and all that, you just go to the back corner of the house and over to their fence.
Okay. Yeah, that would be fine.
That might save you more money.
Well, thank you.
If you look at the photograph that you provided, if you look at your neighbor's
Yeah,
fence, that's why their fence goes to the back corner of their house.
okay.
Same side.
All right, that's
It's
fine.
just their house a
Right,
little
it's-
further forward.
Yes, right. Because I looked at it, I'm like, wait, they come off the back corner. And for me to meet it would be halfway down the distance of my house. Yes.
Any other questions by the board? Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to be heard on the variance? Yeah. Okay. Can you guys relinquish
Yes.
the podium? Sir, if you come forward and just provide us with your name and address, if you would, please.
Yes, my name is Alan Levy. I live at 2233 Balltown Road. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, sir.
I live directly across the street from the gentleman's house, and that's the only front yard that I have. I don't have 2 front yards. So what he's proposing is to put basically a wall in front of my house, which I don't want to necessarily look at. But aside from that, it does sound as though that he is setting it back far enough off of the road that I would be somewhat pleased with that. Although my understanding is you can't have a 6-foot fence on Balltown Road, which is one of the reasons I bought the house where I live at. In fact, my house at 2233 Balltown Road, which I bought 15 years ago, has a variance for a 6-foot fence, which I took down because I thought it was ugly. Now, what you're proposing is to put a white vinyl wall where I look out all day long. It's my only front lawn. I have 3 picture windows that would be looking at this white wall. So I'm a little bit concerned aesthetically what that would do to, first, the neighborhood in the corner. Second, what would it do to the value of my view and my quality of life? And the second point that I think is very important is, as we all know, Balltown Road has a tremendous amount of noise. And it's just as you pointed out, it's something that you're trying to eliminate. Would not a 6-foot fence reflect the noise back towards my house and also contribute to the excessive noise that we already have, including now additional noise from the reflection of this 6-foot wall that sits in front of my house? I completely am opposed to this. And I unfortunately, there's nothing personal, but just as the case before here, where we're talking about this poor girl who lives in the woods and next day wakes up with a 20-foot wall in front of her backyard, I have the same exact concerns. So there would have to be some consideration, as if you've been in front of my house, I have about a 15-foot buffer of landscaping, thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars in investment to get off of Balltown Road, not some $500 vinyl fence. And I would like to ask the board here to consider what an impact that this fence would have directly on my property and my well-being and my quality of life. Sure. That's totally reasonable that you request us to consider that. That's why you're, as a neighbor, invited here to make comments on this. How far back from the road does your home sit?
I don't know.
Can you guess? 30 feet, 50
Why does it
feet?
make a
Oh,
difference?
it's more than 30 feet.
Why does it make a difference?
Well, I mean, so you're bringing up a reasonable concern that you have a white wall in front of your house
Correct.
and that it could reflect noise.
Absolutely.
So those are reasonable concerns. In order for us to fully understand what the impact would be for you, we have to fully understand, okay, so
I don't have the right to sit in my front lawn in front of my house and enjoy the beautiful landscape that I put down, maybe have a table with a sandwich in my front yard because I live on Balltown Road? What are you saying?
I'm asking you how far back from the house, how far back from the road your house sits.
I don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
I've never measured. I don't see where it's relevant either, quite frankly.
Well, I think what Mr. Dolman's getting at is that from the picture that I have in front of me, it looks like you're at 2233, correct?
Correct.
It looks like you have, as you indicated, you have a substantial amount of landscaping in front of your property. So I guess what Mr. Dolman is getting at is how affected you are given the amount of landscaping you have between your home and Balltown Road to even see across the street. I guess that's the question.
I see clearly across the street. Those plants, first of all, as the gentleman says, Balltown Road sits up on a peak. Our properties actually were somewhat lower. I spent probably in the range of $3,000 of adding dirt before I put those plants in so that I could create this natural barrier and have something to put the plants in and then establish. These plants are maybe 4 years old at the most. So at this point, they're not even really established yet, and some of them won't. Secondly, when I designed this landscape, I never expected that I'm supposed to blind or shield a wall
I'm just simply trying to soak up the noise of the road. I'm not trying to shield anything. And the shrubs that I have put in there have somewhat effectively cut down on the noise. But as you can imagine, on Balltown Road, at any given time, a motorcycle, a large truck, an emergency vehicle goes by, and the noise is tremendous. This wall that you're proposing is only going to reflect another 50% more noise my way. I don't know what the actual number would be, but it's all coming my way. No other direction, but my way. How is that fair?
So we have a map up here. Could you come up here and show me? I have some questions about your house.
Turn your,
So this is the house that's asking for the variance. This is your house.
Correct.
Does your house go this way?
My house goes this way. These are very tall trees. The lowest limb on one of these trees is at least 15 foot, just like his trees, at least 15 feet high. So you can see clearly all the way to this fence. And so I have a nice green space to look at. What you're proposing is to put a wall here. My house is right here. His yard ends here. He just took out all these trees. So these trees don't even exist anymore. This is all green now. So you're expecting to put a fence here?
No, this is just showing what the property line is. The fence is going to be in here.
Back
No,
here,
it's gonna be behind the wall though.
got it behind the wall
Approximately
there.
30 feet back.
30 feet
setback
back,
from the
that's
road.
where that's gonna be.
So 30 feet is gonna be where? Right where the blue line is? No.
No, over here, somewhere. I can't scale it out, I got nothing to
just
scale.
put it on the
So it's
blue
gonna
line.
be about right there.
Okay, so the wall is gonna be parallel to Balltown Road running this way.
Yes.
On the blue line. That is my problem. I have 2 picture windows. This is the addition of my house.
So
My
that
house
was my
is like
question.
this.
If I wanted to know
Right.
if your house
My
goes
house
this way.
goes all the way over here to this pine tree. My chimney is about under that pine tree.
Okay, now, so they're here for a variance so that it could go 6 feet. They have the option of putting up a 4-foot fence.
Correct.
Do you have concerns with
No.
that?
Not at all.
Okay, thank you.
oh, I'm sorry, sir. Could I ask you one more question? Sorry. I know that the plan, or at least the proposed plan, was a white vinyl fence.
Right.
What about color? Would color matter to you?
Actually, I could go with a 6-foot white vinyl fence, set back at least 30 foot from the edge of the road if they put some landscaping in front of that fence. However, over here, they're saying that they can't do that kind of a contingency. I would simply prefer that the entire thing was landscaped, but because he wants a pool, I can understand he wants a fence there.
And the other thing is he could put a 4-foot fence up
Right,
without even being here.
exactly.
My point is he could put that 4-foot fence up without asking for a variance. It's just the idea of the 4 versus the 6. You'd be okay with a 4? Or you don't want a fence
I
at
don't
all?
want a fence at all, but.
Okay, but
I
my
can't-
point
I'm
is,
not going to stop him from.
right, well, we can't.
Right.
The issue is he could put a 4-foot fence up.
I don't
And-
see that as
and-
being an issue. We already discussed that he
Right,
can do that.
We can't, he doesn't need a variance to do that. So the point is,
What is your point?
the point is, are you telling us you'd be okay with a 4-foot fence?
Sure. I just did. Why are we still talking about that?
Okay.
I mean, I've been here for several hours just to listen to all of this going on, et cetera, this case. I'm a citizen of Niskuna for 15 years. I've put in a ton of work into my property over the last 15 years. You're showing pictures that are ancient, trees that are 15 foot at least is the lowest limb. You're looking directly at this fence. I don't think I'm being unreasonable by suggesting that A, it's going to reflect a lot of sound back that I don't want, as well as being aesthetically not attractive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I got a question to ask the applicant.
While he's walking up, can I just note for the record that an accessory structure is not allowed in the front yard without a variance, which a pool is classified as an accessory structure?
I have a question to ask the applicant. You got children?
Yes.
How old?
I have an autistic 15-year-old son.
Okay. And he brings his friends over.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. And sometimes kids play, and Balltown's a busy road, I know it real well.
Yes, yes. And just so you know, my property sits probably 3 feet below the crown of the road. So if the gentleman's looking out his front window, he's seeing 2 foot of fence. I don't know. That's just, I know the elevation. I've checked it. That's why a 4 foot wouldn't work. That's why I'm here for 6 foot,
Right.
you know?
I'm concerned about 2 things here. And I understand this gentleman's thoughts, but I got more concern for the safety of the children. Paul goes out there, kids run out in the street. Balltown Road's a busy road. I got real great concern that if a ball went out there and they're all hyped up, run right out there and get whacked with a car. I got a problem with that. Another thing, you're right, that indentation down there, I think it's about a 2 foot. If I'm not mistaken, it's a little bit more than 2 foot. I was over there looking at that. I was looking at through the neighborhood. I don't see why if you put that fence where Mr. Ferrari said where you'd have a problem. Am I right?
Which fence are we talking about?
The 6 foot fence on the back side.
Which side of the house are we talking about?
Balltown side.
You're saying extending from the rear corner of the house,
Right.
as Mr. Latif had mentioned to the
Right,
applicant
as you
earlier.
mentioned.
Yeah, he's gonna go to the back of the house. We already agreed on that. Laura, do we have to, we need to do anything when he's agreeing to, right?
Right,
Yeah,
and we'll do that once we get
Yeah,
to that point.
we'll verbally amend it, that he's willing to go to the back of the house with the fence and,
right.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know how far we're gonna carry this. but-
Any other questions? Anyone else who has not been heard, who wishes to be heard on the issue? Hearing none, any other questions by the board? And Mr. Walsh, just so the board is clear, based on the conversation, just so we know what's before us, you're willing to amend your initial request for a variance to include, as you face the front of your house on the left side, moving that one section of fence back to the corner of your house,
To the
correct?
rear corner.
To the
yes.
rear corner.
Yes.
Okay, so as amended by that. Nobody else? Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we grant the amended application. I have found that the benefit cannot be achieved by other means, especially considering the grade of that slope right there. I do not find that this is an undesirable change in the neighborhood. I drive that road every day. I run on that road. I'm aware of the character of the neighborhood. It is my opinion that it's not a negative change. It is a substantial request. We as a board have frequently ruled that 6 foot fences are substantial. There's no adverse environmental effects. And while this is self-created,
You're out of order.
while this,
Okay, sir, please, you had your opportunity. No, you were not ignored.
No,
We
you
heard
weren't.
your concerns, sir. We're just please trying to follow the order, and I would caution anyone on this board speaking out at this point. We're now in the process of having a motion made, so please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will, so I do find that the effects are this is a self-created concern. However, that is not determinative. On the balance, I do find that this is a reasonable application. I vote to grant the application as amended.
I second it for the reasons stated.
We had a motion, we've had it seconded, and again, reminding that this is the motion or the request for a variance as amended, if you could call the roll.
Mr. Latif?
I'm going to vote yes. It is a awkward property that you have situation. The applicant showed me that he's willing to move the fence to the back of the house, which we don't allow on this board, fences in the middle of the house. So the applicant was willing to work with us and move this back. I can feel the property, the way it's on Bolton. I live on Route 7 myself. I understand that the traffic is heavy. I did hear the neighbor comments, and we take it into consideration, but I'm still voting yes on this application.
Ms. McGinnis?
Yes, for the reasons stated.
Mr. Daly?
Yes, for all the reasons stated.
Mr. Green?
I'm voting no. I believe that this will make an undesirable change in the neighborhood. I too have driven up and down Balltown Road for decades, and most recently on Sunday. And I spent some time there, and while I am, your concerns, the applicant's concerns are not lost upon me, and I do consider them valid. I do see this as being a change along Balltown Road, where should this board grant the application, we will now have what seems to be the 6-foot fence, where I didn't see any other 6-foot fence on the corner of any of the intersecting roads in the vicinity of Balltown Road. So respectfully, I vote no.
Mr. Hoke?
I will also vote no. My concern is similar to Mr. Green's concern. We've had multiple applicants come before this board with properties, corner properties all along Balltown Road, and we have a piecemeal patchwork of rulings in which invariably everybody comes with the legitimate concerns that you're raising. And like Mr. Green, they're not lost on me. I have children too, and I appreciate the desire to protect them and pets as well. But invariably, those are the same concerns of everybody that comes before the board. And all the corner properties on Balltown Road, I haven't seen any distinctions between the properties that we grant 6-foot fence variances for and those that we don't. And that concerns me. I know that each property is unique, but I can't make any significant distinctions between this property and other properties. I know there was one relatively close by that we denied the variance for, another corner property on Balltown Road a few years ago. So for those reasons and the overall, reason that was articulated by the neighbor to a certain extent is that the town code exists to discourage 6-foot fences or to prohibit 6-foot fences in front yards for the very reason that the neighbor was concerned about here. So for those reasons, I also respectfully vote no.
Mr. Dolman?
I vote yes for the reasons stated.
Acting Chairman Frary?
This is an issue that and I've heard for a long time, sitting on this board for a long time, of people talking about one of the reasons we don't put 6-foot fences in front yards is they, as corny as it sounds, it's a welcoming issue in this community. You're in a unique situation, and I share your pain. There are certain things I can't do on my property like you, or certain accommodations that need to be made. I understand completely your concern about security, pets, kids. However, I look at this and I say that can be achieved with a 4-foot fence. I understand the buffering issue, but with all due respect, I lived on Fairlawn Parkway, which is a block over, for a number of years. And I can attest to the Balltown Road noise, and I lived a block off Balltown. And I sympathize with you as that as well. I also know this property very well. I was close friends, my family, with the Jungs, who used to live where the pool is next door to you before they moved away, which is long before your time. But I'm familiar with that house and this neighborhood. I share Mr. Green's concerns that we are creating by putting a 6-foot fence in this location, a precedent that we can't or will have difficulty backing away from. I am happy to hear that you're leaving the trees there. And I think that doing so helps the environmental issue, but I can't get away from the impact on the neighborhood, the impact on the aesthetics as you drive down Balltown Road, as strange as that may sound. We have a lot of people with true front yards, including the neighbor that was here. And I understand those concerns. I just see this being achieved, even with the accommodation that you made, seeing this being achieved in other forms and other fashions, which I think can get you to the same point. For those reasons, as well as the reasons from Mr. Hoke and Mr. Green, I must vote no as well. But based on the board vote here, your variance is granted 4-3. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
And I would thank you for your patience. You had to sit through a lot of long stuff, so.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have a, Vinnie, sit down. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
We are adjourned. I would, again, plead with everybody who you now have your calendar, please make sure that you are available, because it is a difficult thing to find substitutes and alternates when we can't make
They
it.
got more, so.
And also, since we tabled the solar array issue, it would be great if people who are sitting tonight were there, so that we don't have to rehash the entire application.
Oh, it was kind of fun. Had a lot